So in this video we are going to look at effleurage techniques. Now the first one we would call half moon. Now this is a series of hand movements that are both doing a half circle, really useful for both the back and the legs. So typically going to be used for applying lotion, getting your first touch of your client and warming up the first few strokes.
So this is figure of 8, and again it's very similar to half moon. It's a warming up technique, and it's a lotion application technique. So it's going to increase the circulation slightly, but it's your starter really. It can be used on the back and the legs, as you can see here. Just use your fingertips more on the legs to make it easier.
So the next technique is called flat hand. Now, make sure you reinforce your joints. You can see two hands, one on top of the other here. Really good to use on back, legs, and you can adapt it for the arms where you don't need to reinforce in the same way. Now, it can be varied in pressure. You can go really light if you're warming up, but also much deeper. Now, you can see how Tamsin at the top in this video turns her hands to keep the hand moving, going right to the top of the muscle, really important. I've also put in this variation where the hands move sideways so you can see how they overlap there. And again, a little bit here on the arm so you can see much lighter, one hand only required, the other hand is supporting the arm. So as it comes towards you, again, you can see there, no pressure over the joint, there's a little bit of lift off, and that's where we are.
So this is flat hand friction. This is a much quicker technique, and this is really just bringing the blood to the surface of the skin. Try and keep one hand in contact with the body all the time and keep moving. Can be used anywhere that you don't really need to support the joint too much, so legs and back realistically, I think.
So the next one is called gliding. Now this is where the hands are moving in opposite directions, moving away from each other. I really like it for use on the back, legs, arms, but can adapt it wherever you need it to. Really good for warming out, flushing the area, adding some real variety to your massage. You can see here around the shoulder blade, it's a really nice technique for getting in and around the area. So what you'll see as we move on to look at it on the leg is that you can sort of go transverse across the tissues. Now I like this as sort of a feel of opening up the muscle a little bit. Really need to make sure you've got a nice appropriate amount of lotion on for this. You don't want to be slipping off and losing control. Again, on the arm you can do it. Just scale it down so you can see much more use of sort of thumbs and fingers rather than the whole heel of the hand in order to do the gliding action.
So next up we have V. This is a good broad stroke that can be used pretty much anywhere. It's quite nice because you can wrap your hands around limbs as well, so it's a nice stroke. It's good for starting, finishing and warming and flushing the tissues. So if you look at the hands, you've got, you spread the hands in a V with your thumb out and your fingers to one side, and you slip the other hand inside it. So it's two hands in a V shape, one on top of the other. And here you can see, like I said, where it just wraps around the limbs, so it makes it a really thorough flushing technique. And here we've got it on the arm, so I've reduced down to one hand, and just to make sure I've got good support there of the elbow. So don't ever worry about adjusting when you're treating. Make sure you get things right. And as you can see, that V shape between the thumb and the fingers there. So like I said, wrapping around the limbs.
So the next technique we're going to look at is Pisces Form. Now that's using the Pisces Form bone in your hand, and it's really a flushing, linking technique. Now, probably not one that Tamsin and I would use an awful lot, but lots of people absolutely love it. You can't get a huge amount of pressure with it, but it can be used back, legs, arms. You can see in the video, don't force it. And also it's really important to support the tissues at the lower end. Just keeps everything a little bit more stable. And as a result, gives you sort of a nice consistent flow in your rhythm.
Okay, so this is probably our favourite. This is Forearm Glide. So make sure you're using the upper 2/3 of the lower arm, so from the elbow towards the wrist, that 2/3, because your bones are not quite as strong as you get towards the wrist and you can do yourself some damage, so be careful there. Can be used anywhere on the body pretty much, and you can really change your pressure with this, so you can go from very light to very deep, and if you want to become very specific you can actually focus more with the elbow. I use this technique so much, it's ridiculous.
So next technique, this is called cam and spindle. Now in essence, you're using the knuckle on one hand and guiding it with the flat hand of the other by holding the thumb in the middle. It's a really versatile technique, can be used light and quick, or it can be used very, very deep and much slower. Now you can reverse it and come back towards yourself, as you can see here. And what's a lovely example on the shoulder is how that guiding hand, that flat hand, can sort of twist and pivot round to ensure that the actual knuckle and the force of the muscle stays directly where you need it to be. So again, just another angle of how that's going to work. Now, as I mentioned, you can make that deeper or slower, and therefore can be used basically for anything, whether that be warming up or finishing off a treatment. Linking techniques really are very, very few restrictions.
Can I just interject here? You can see sometimes I have my, what I'd call the spindle hand flat, and sometimes I wrap it around my knuckles. So you can do it either way. It's not really a problem at all. You can either wrap the fingers around so they're out the way, or have them straight to there as a guide for you.
Yeah, absolutely, really important. And also you can see how Tamsin in all those clips goes right to the top of the muscle. And make sure you're not putting your fingers under the towels. That's another time when wrapping the fingers around the knuckle can be really useful.
Okay, now we're on to butterfly. So this is a small area. So working nice tight spots, this one is good for. So it's not so much of a flushing technique, it's much of a deeper technique, targeting adherences and tight muscles, things like that. So you must really be careful to protect your joints here. Make sure that you use thumb on thumb, or that you use a knuckle instead sometimes as well. And again, like cam and spindle, you can reverse it. So you can drag the thumbs towards you rather than pushing away. So this is great around shoulder blades and the top of the glutes, places like that. So it's versatile anywhere in the body. Sometimes you'll see that I'll have folded my fingers underneath, and in some clips you can see that my fingers are out flat. It's whatever you find more comfortable for you. Some people's fingers are very tight and it's quite hard to keep them out straight like that. So generally I prefer to tuck mine away, if I'm honest.
You can also see how the body is always behind the technique. Really important to keep sort of your elbows fairly straight on this one, so that the force is going straight through to the reinforced thumbs rather than you having to work too hard.
So here you can see on the arm in a second that I will go to a single finger rather than two. Because I have very strong hands, I can get away with this, and also because I'm not putting so much pressure through and it is a small muscle that I'm working on, it allows me to do this. And this is a great technique on this area because this bit gets so tight. So this is really worthwhile doing this technique here.
So this technique is only really able to be utilised on the back, and we would call this a reverse rake. So it's going up the body, and you can see a finger on either side but still supported by that hand. You can then do a true rake, and that is going down the back. Now, one of the very few occasions where we would, and it's still supported. Really important to keep your body over this technique. Tends to be quite slow, really controlled is important.
And finally, moneymaker. And you'll see why this gets its name. It's a really, really nice way to finish your treatment. So it flushes the entire back. It warms up the muscles. So it's firm, but it's not deep. And it's quite a complex movement, but you will get your head around it. It's not as difficult as it looks, but it feels lovely, I have to be honest.
To have done is lovely.
And just as you come back into the bottom of the occipital bone, a nice little bit of pressure there just to finish it off. I quite often finish with 3 of these, just flushing down. Just be careful not to lose your fingers too far under the towel there at the bottom.